Since trading for Zach Lavine, the Kings have not been playing well. It's obviously still early, but there are concerning signs for Sacramento in the post-De'Aaron Fox era. In the 2 games they played, they've lost to a struggling Orlando team and gave up 130 points to a team that can't score against anybody right now. And then they lost to the suddenly red-hot Portland Trailblazers and only put up 102 points. And there's a couple of main issues here. The first and foremost is that they just haven't practiced with the guy. They said on the broadcast during the Trailblazers game, like, they haven't practiced with him and they won't practice with him until the All-Star break. But that doesn't stop teams from immediately implementing new players in the NBA. This happens every single trade deadline, and it's part of it. When you make a midseason deal, you know that you're changing a bunch of pieces that are going to have to figure it out on the fly. So that's obviously a caveat over all of this. The other issue I'm seeing with them, though, is there is real confusion over who the primary guy is right now, especially in transition. Sacramento wants to play fast, and previously it was Sabonis gets the board and he takes it up, or Sabonis gets the board and he gets it ahead to De'Aaron Fox, and he was the creator. He was the one that was going to drive and kick and potentially pull up from 3, all that stuff. Now they're kind of trying to figure out who that guy is. DeMar DeRozan's not someone you want to give the ball to in transition. Lavine is pretty good in transition, but isn't necessarily used to being the guy to bring the ball up all the time. Same thing with Malik Monk, who's very good, but they're trying to put him in this like kind of point guard-esque role because they're just punting on the point guard position. Like, it's Keon Ellis, Lavine, Monk, and DeRozan. None of those guys are point guards, although 3 of them are, primary on-ball creator guys potentially. It's just a little bit messy. They're trying to figure out how to get all 3 of those guys to coexist, and that also extends to their rotations. They're trying to figure out which of those guys play best with each other, and it's just obviously something they're still trying to figure it out. The thing that I think they're ultimately going to land on is Sabonis is going to be the point guard. Essentially, they're going to run everything out of the elbows and dribble handoffs and stuff, and it's going to be Zach Lavine coming off that with Malik Monk and DeMar DeRozan on the far side, or they're going to go to DeRozan on the dribble handoff, or potentially put him in the mid post and have Sabonis try and space from 3. There's things they can do without just having a point guard like De'Aaron Fox running things, and I think mostly in the half court they'll be fine. They just need to figure out some of the transition stuff, because in theory they should still be a good transition team. The other thing that's always hard when you're adding a new guy in the middle of the year is Zach Lavine is just trying to find his spots, where he wants to be on the floor, how he works with all these other guys, and he doesn't want to immediately just come in and take over everything. He's not that level of player. He's not that much better than DeMar DeRozan or Malik Monk or anything, so he doesn't want to just come in and take over, but it's clear that he's a little bit uncomfortable with this new team, like I said, that just comes with not practicing. The other issue for them is that they can't figure out what their best lineup is. It doesn't really matter to me who they start the game with, but who they end the game with is definitely a question mark. You know that DeRozan is going to finish the game because he's still one of the best closers in the entire league, depending on how well he's playing on a given night. You know that Sabonis is going to close the game. And apart from that, you're not really sure. Keegan Murray continually is a part of that lineup, but you never really know if he should be. Then you've got Keon Ellis, who's been awesome for them and is also the only guy that guards. He's been really good since Doug Christie took over. Then you've got Lavine, and then you got Monk. Those are 6 guys, and 4 of them are guards, unless you want to count DeMar DeRozan as like kind of a forward, which he can be at times, depending on the lineup. And then Keegan Murray is the guy that you'd probably like to leave off the closing lineup. You'd like to go with Monk, Lavine, DeRozan, Ellis, and Sabonis, but that lineup against a bunch of teams is just way too small. So they're still trying to figure out all those things. Now, that was the case even with De'Aaron Fox there, which is one of the reasons it's a little bit confusing as to why they swapped out Fox for Lavine, because Monk's been really good. You still have DeRozan. Ellis has been a nice backcourt partner. Then Murray, Sabonis. And the team is just a weird fit because they have evolved beyond the let's have Malik Monk be the 6th man thing. Malik Monk's very good. He's good enough to start on this team. He's good enough to be a primary creator on this team, even with Lavine and DeRozan there. And again, it's not about who starts. If you want to say that Malik Monk will come off the bench so that Keon Ellis can start, that's fine. It's about closing lineups. It's about the team that you have on the floor at the end of the game, and ideally that's your 5 best players. And right now it is a question mark as to how Sacramento gets to that place. And unless you just say that Keon Ellis isn't going to be out there, it's going to be Monk, Lavine, DeRozan, Murray, and Sabonis. The issue is just that defensively they don't have plus defenders. DeRozan doesn't guard, Lavine doesn't really guard, Monk doesn't really guard. It's Keon Ellis, Keegan Murray, and that's about it. And Sabonis isn't going to provide you any rim protection. And so the way their team is constructed now also was kind of the way it was constructed before, where they know they're just going to have to outscore teams, but they're now worse because Zach Lavine is just worse than De'Aaron Fox. Now, realistically, the trade for them was probably more about the future picks. They're not going to get the Charlotte pick this year, but the San Antonio pick in 2027 and the Minnesota pick in 2031 largely are the main goal of the deal, while also getting back a player that can kind of replace some of what De'Aaron Fox does in Zach Lavine. It's just weird now with DeMar DeRozan still there, Monk being as good as he is And it's clear that there's probably a DeMar DeRozan trade coming in the offseason if they can find a suitor for him. Because if you take him out of this, then you can go Monk, Lavine, Ellis, Murray, Sabonis. It's still a small lineup, but you know who your guys are. You know it's Monk and Lavine. You know that both those guys can space. You can run in transition. You don't have to worry about weird mid-post stuff with DeMar DeRozan. You don't have to worry about the fact that nobody ever guards him from beyond the three-point line. And you have someone in Keon Ellis that you know you can stick on, Anthony Edwards, whatever the case may be, whatever guard you want to put Keon Ellis on. And then you can just kind of finesse and figure out the rest of the defensive stuff with Keegan Murray. That really, I think, is the piece that they're struggling to figure out. And quite frankly, the piece that they should have seen if there was a market for at the deadline. But the new reality is that this is their team, a team that is trying to make the play-in, a team that is trying to make the playoffs. It's clear with what they got in return for De'Aaron Fox that their goal is to still be a decent team this year. And then any more significant changes would have to come in the offseason. The only other thing I could see them do potentially in the offseason is that now that they have Lavine, Monk, maybe they keep DeRozan, is seeing what the value would be out there for someone like Keegan Murray and using those extra first-round picks they have, the 27 San Antonio and the 2031 Minnesota, as a way to try and upgrade the Keegan Murray spot. Because even though they really like him, their fans still kind of like him, he can just be very inconsistent from a shooting perspective and is just kind of out there sometimes. He's got a little bit of that Andrew Wiggins, Tobias Harris to his game, where it's like he can play 35 minutes and you never really particularly notice that he's out there. And if they're serious about still trying to be a decent team, even post-De'Aaron Fox trade, that could potentially be a spot they could move on from. But all in all, Zach Lavine's very good. He's going to provide them plenty of scoring. They just have to figure out the lineup stuff. And like I said, they have to practice. You know this when you make the deal. You know that the situation is going to be weird immediately after. But once they get past the All-Star break and they actually get to play together and they try and make the push towards the end of the year and towards the playoffs, I'd imagine things are going to look better. It's always going to look clunky when you are not only adding a new star scorer kind of perimeter player to your team, but also you're adding him when there isn't necessarily a clear hierarchy of who is who's the top guy, who's the secondary and tertiary creators on the team. That hierarchy just isn't there, so it's a little bit awkward. It's not like Zach Lavine is one of the 3 best basketball players in the world and he just shows up and says, okay, now this is my team. It's not the case for Sacramento. The other guys are very good. I'd imagine ultimately they'll be able to figure it out. Defensively, they're just never going to be good. That's just the way the construction of their team is, but I'd expect them to be better moving forward with Lavine than they have been in these first 2 games, but it certainly hasn't been a good sign because they lost to 2 teams in Orlando and Portland that are defensive heavy teams. They want to guard, they want to bring size to the floor, and Sacramento has struggled in 2 different ways. One, they've struggled because they gave up 130 to Orlando, and then they struggled against Portland because they only scored 102. Portland scored 108 and won the game. That's kind of been their formula lately, but you can see where the holes are in this Sacramento roster post-Lavine trade. But the ironic thing is, those holes also existed pre-Zach Lavine trade, even with De'Aaron Fox on this roster. The issues that they're having now were also still kind of there with the exception of the hierarchy. Everybody knew it was De'Aaron Fox's team, and also some of the transition stuff, like I said, where they just give it to Fox and play fast in transition. I'm going to continue to keep an eye on how things look moving forward with Lavine, but it's definitely been an interesting start to his Kings tenure.